Moving on, delving deeper with our second panel discussion on Indian-ness, a design introspection. We feel delighted to have amongst us Mr. Pierre Valentine, Managing Director at Ultra Confidential. Guys, give a big round of applause to Mr. Pierre Valentine. He will be our moderator for the second panel discussion, which is on Indian-ness, a design introspection.
Welcome, Mr. Pierre. To elucidate upon the agenda, may we have on stage Ms. Lipika Sood, Director, Lipika Sood Interiors Private Limited. Mr. Akshay Malhotra, Executive Chef at ITC Group of Hotels. Ms. Mrinalini, Editor for Mondo Arc. Mr. Neeraj Mitra, an artist, sculptor, and a curator. Please give them a huge round of applause. Last but not the least, Ms. Asha Sairam, Design Head, Studio Lotus.
Guys, keep the applause going.
Over to you, sir.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So that's a very interesting topic, and thank you for taking me in this panel of discussion. It's a very interesting topic because it's also difficult. India is a big country with a lot of cultural diversity. So first of all, I will probably express what is my vision of the Indian-ness. My understanding of Indian-ness is that it's the feeling of being an Indian, which can be expressed through different forms. It can be the cultural aspect, it can be the social aspect, the architecture, the design as well. So this is why it's important today to discuss about this topic. Maybe I can give the speech to Lipika. What is your vision of the Indian-ness, and how do you express it in your designs?
See, Indian-ness as a word is very relative. It's something that we feel as a human being when we are born in a particular country. And Indian-ness, obviously, because we are born in India. I will talk from a very general perspective, because if we start looking and talking too much into the whole technical aspects of what is exactly Indian-ness, what does the dictionary say, and so on and so forth, I think it will be pretty boring for the students and for the audience at large. I think Indian-ness is what we feel when we see a cricket match. We suddenly feel so Indian. Everybody is, gunning for India to win. And therefore, suddenly the Indian-ness starts. But on another plane, a student or somebody in today's times would think, what the hell is this all Indian-ness all about? It's just, I am Indian, so big deal. I was born in India, that's the way I am. So it's all so relative. It's also relative, Sometimes you're so Indian because you want to be Indian and you want to showcase to the world that this is it. There are other times, you are even debating whether standing up for the national anthem when before a movie, it seems very painful. So Indianness has to be a little more than just a concept. It has to be more deep-rooted. And when we talk about Indianness and design is what the question is. In fact, I'm very happy to have somebody from a Western land, if I may say so. French, am I right, Pierre? To ask me about, or the audience, and discuss Indianness. It is when Westerners talk about Indianness is when we actually wake up and suddenly sometimes sit back and start introspecting and saying, hey, listen, I was born Indian, there were such beautiful things around me which are Indian, such beautiful designs. I probably never even appreciated it. It is a Westerner who has helped me to wake up and accept the fact that I am Indian and therefore I need to appreciate what's around me. And that I feel is what is this whole subject of Indianness is all about. How do we feel? How proud do we feel about being an Indian? The pride is the bottom line. And the moment we feel the pride, the true pride from within, everything else will fall in place. Be it for an architect, be it for a designer, in any creative field, interiors, fashion, anything, or even an IT person. Even he's very creative, you know. To design a program is creativity. So I think it's all about how we feel from within, how proud we feel of what we've inherited from our forefathers, and how we want to take it forward and not feel shy about it, is what Indianness is all about. Coming to your next question about how I use that Indianness, well, I see there's a lot of very rich cultural heritage in the form of crafts that we have inherited. It's very difficult to first understand these crafts, and even after understanding it, to be able to use it productively and creatively in the modern times is actually a very big challenge. But if it is used creatively, it can actually create a really big, statement, which can be a fashion statement, a style statement. It is very fashionable to be able to have something in your home which is very Indian in its nature. Unlike a lot of people's perception, they think, oh, craft, ye to Delhi Haat mein milta hai. It's not, upscale. I rather have a Swarovski, crystal bowl in my drawing room than have a Bastar panel. Or how many people even know about it? So I think that knowledge, converting that knowledge of Indianness into something more creative and showcasing it to the world in a very contemporarized fashion is actually what this whole challenge of being a good designer is all about. And so much of talk has happened just in the previous panel about design and aligning design to business. I think this whole thing about converting this creativity, this Indianness, and into a business model is a very, very doable thing. And I think all the students sitting here should look at it as a very, very good challenge and look at it as part of their business model. So it's creativity, Indianness, marrying business and taking it and showcasing it to the world and being proud of it. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for this wonderful answer, Lipika. Now, talking to Akshay, how do you express Indian culture in your day-to-day activity when cooking?
Well, I'm not an Indian trained chef, so after I came back to India, I realized if you can't cook Indian in India, then that's a problem. So we went back to the drawing board, picked up, and I realized that Indian food represents not only what's in the bowl or on the plate, but it represents the area, it represents what you grow, and in turn it reflects who they are, who are eating the plate. I mean, so it defines them. So it's extremely important to understand who you're making food for, and extremely important to understand what their needs are, and then you design a plate for them. So it might seem a very easy task that you go in, you make a plate of food and it goes out, but there is a lot of there is a long process behind it, and we know our food. Indians know their food, so it's really, you have to pay attention to detail. You have to go back into history, understand what, why, where, stay with season. You feed people what grows in that area, and I think that's the easiest way out to understand Indian food.
Great, thank you. Mrinalini, so from Mondo Arc, which is an international magazine on design, is it a challenge? Is the Indianness being a challenge to access a global platform?
Is it a challenge for Indians to access a global platform? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, correct.
I think firstly I'd like to reinstate what Lipika said earlier, to have you moderate this panel here. To answer your question, I think what we feel is that Indians need a platform to project their work internationally, but it's as important to bring international work into the country. I think it's important to have a dialogue which is two ways, where not only are Indian designers talking to Indian designers, or globally are people talking amongst each other, but to bring global design to India to show people what's happening elsewhere, and to also take Indian design and tell the world what's happening over there. You being not from India, but having worked over here, I think there's an Indianness to your work. Right. To also reinstate what Lipika said earlier, for me, it's about the context. And with the magazine, it's about the context. We are showcasing a lot of Indian work here. But we talk about the different kinds of work that are happening in India, right? They don't necessarily have to be branded Indian or not. I think that is a big challenge today, where we don't necessarily have an Indian identity in design. And that's something that all of us are struggling with across the board, whether it's, I take the liberty of saying whether it's food, or whether it's architecture, whether it's interiors, whether it's fashion. I think there's this need to identify what Indianness is, which we haven't been able to do yet. But I think it's interesting that we're at the cusp of at least wanting to do that. So.
Great. Thank you for your answer. My personal experience is whenever a customer, even from abroad, is willing to design a project in India, they always ask us to bring some subtle Indian touch. And this is something which is, you have such a strong culture that it's something which, even if you go for a contemporary concept, you will end up bringing some Indian touches. What about you, Asha? What is your perception of the Indianness in your work?
I think what Mrinalini said is very accurate. It's very hard to define what Indianness is. And more often than not, when I engage in this discussion with people, I walk away feeling maybe it's not really important to define it. Because if you just look at the breadth of our country and the diversity that exists in craft, in textile, in cuisine, in landscape, in materials, there is so much to play with. And the fact that every time you're working on something, be it in any field of design, you have the opportunity to draw from such a variety of points of inspiration. I think that in itself is just a tremendous palette to be able to play with. To try and define Indianness in any one way would almost in some sense restrict it. So it's that ambiguity of what is and is not Indian that I think is a really beautiful place to be able to express ourselves. And in my work and in the work with our studio, I just think it's an opportunity to be able to celebrate it. The fact that there's so many different techniques and materials and crafts that we have within the country, that we can just celebrate it and be proud of it.
Taking from what Asha said about celebrating our crafts, to be able to celebrate anything, the starting point is knowledge. How many of us really have the knowledge of what these crafts are all about? Do our school and college curriculums talk about it, teach us? I'm asking these students. There is this paper cutting craft, which is an ancient craft coming down from the Mahabharata and the Ramayans. It has appeared in those books. It's called Sanji. It's a paper cutting craft from Mathura. How many of you really know about this craft? With a raise of hands, please. Just one in the audience of 200. It's a paper cutting craft where only 2 families are left to do this craft in India. It is a beautiful craft. It has been showcased internationally. I was in Germany, and in a small city in Germany, I saw this huge panel outside of a building, and they were proudly saying, oh, this is a craft from India, it's called Sanji, it's made out of paper. What about in India? We are here sitting in a room full of designers, students, who are going to be the future of our design industry. You don't even know about this craft. How do we celebrate it? So friends, I think it's important we wake up. We wake up when we are talking about establishing design institutions, innovative institutions. Let's start from the bottom. Let's start from where Tulika says designing has to be taught from the age of 5 to the age of 50. No, designing has to be taught from the day the baby comes out of the womb of the mother. That's what the Japanese say. The Japanese are so proud of their culture that when a baby is born, from the time he starts talking, he's told to appreciate everything around his house. The arts, the crafts, the culture. And that pride he takes forward and takes it to the next generation. And Tulika, why 50? Why not after 50? I think life begins at 50. I think we are all so busy with our everyday work life, trying to put, you know, the two ends meet till the age of 50 with home and children and everything. It's, I think, after 50, all those who have not done it at the age of 5 should be able to take it up as your personal social responsibility. Why do the government have to, I need your mic. I think this mic is not behaving with me. I think it doesn't agree. I think we need to take it up as our own personal social responsibilities. For all those in the audience who are 50 plus, and you think you can still contribute, and I think you can tremendously contribute. Because now you have all the time in the world to be able to appreciate the things that you have not been able to do for other reasons. And tell the children, tell your grandchildren, your children, your neighbors' children, your maid's children, how to appreciate a piece of art. In your own home, buy a piece of art with pride and put it up in your homes and showcase the Indianness that we need to showcase and to be proud of it. I think that is what the awareness factor is, and I would request the IVS faculty and the people behind it to keep that in mind, to put this in the curriculum, that when we need to understand design, when we are talking about creativity, when we are talking about honing professionals and looking at design in the genre of business, how do we integrate the Indianness, the Indian heritage, the Indian craft, all of this into our visual languages, so that the world looks at it and comes to India and says, we need to learn your crafts, we need to learn your culture, we need to understand your heritage. And we proudly tell them that, yes, we will teach you. But for that, we need to know our subject first, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Lipika, for this very nice witness. Coming to you, how do you feel? Do you feel it is a duty for you to express the Indianness in your work? Do you feel proud to use Indianness in your day-to-day activity?
It's very important that we are rooted to our culture, as everyone is saying, that we need to appreciate what we have inherited. It's everywhere, it's massive. But we are not using it because influence of the Westerns and otherwise, it's so much there that especially internet has taken over. The originality, there are very few people who are like really going to the roots and taking inspiration from there. And as you have been telling, like we should have workshops with the craftsmen, sitting with them. Though government is providing a lot of facilities in this regard also. You go to craft museum, they don't even charge you anything, and you can sit with the artisans and you can learn metal craft and leather puppetry, anything, whatever. They have got a month-long program going on which you can deal with them. And to retain that, it's very important that, of course, you know your basics first, and that Indianness will automatically, it's there. It just needs to be showcased in a different, of course you can be more experimental, and of course global approach can be there, but Indianness definitely should come out. And we are so rich in our culture. I mean, you look at the architecture, colors, forms, everywhere it's there. I mean, I need not to say all that because you are experiencing it and we have been experiencing it, but just need to like take it on a different level altogether.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that's it. We are running short in time for today. So we'll go to the next. I was informed that there was a small video by Raghurai who could not make it today. I don't know if...
For me, even today, India is my whole world. because here I can close my eyes and take pictures because I can smell, I can feel the sounds and smells and respond to it. And some of the important photographers, they say, what you've done on India, nobody else has ever done it and nobody can do it. Because that's where I was born, brought up, and culturally, enhanced and experienced what life can be in this part of the world. And for me, that quality of being in your own land, in your own space, in your own culture was so precious that here I am being fulfilled. And I say, in your lifetime, if you can, only one experience of one culture, one country can be captured is more than enough. I'm not here to flirt with the rest of the world. Go here, go. For me, being myself, I'll rather be original copy of myself than a second-rate copy of anybody else's work. For me, that has been very clear to me. And Indianness is not, and in terms of architecture, my God, what architecture we've had. What heritage we have got. Even the British architecture that came into India got almost molded by the Indian architecture. And even Islamic architecture had Hindu influence eventually. And if our young minds can't see that blend and that ethos, and if they can't continue with it, what a dead horse. And वो कहते हैं ना कि जो आँख ही से न टपके वो फिर लहू क्या है.
Well, that was a very relevant message by Mr. Raghu Rai, a very well-renowned photographer related to Indianness.
Sorry, can I ask Pierre a question? Just, yes. I think it would be a loss to not hear your perspective. The fact that you're from France and you've been practicing in India for so long, what do you feel is the relevance of Indianness in your practice?
So yes, as I was saying a little bit earlier, there is always a mark of Indianness in our work. So we try to learn, we try to understand. We have done recently a big project for Amazon that was a fashion studio, which is fully inspired by Indian culture while being contemporary. So it was a very interesting work which we did, and we had to get deeply into the Indian culture to understand what are the values and what could we be using for this design, for this project. So it's always about understanding, and it's difficult exercise for us to understand deeply what is India, actually. So it's very interesting to mix this cultural diversity. And among my team, we have Indians, we have French, we have Italian designers, and it's very interesting. The exchanges which happen within the team are wonderful.
Like Asha said, we should just celebrate diversity as an Indianness, right? Maybe we should at least start exploring that idea, maybe.
Yeah, perfectly true. Thank you, everybody.
Following on the same lines, let us have a quick look at a video that is a tribute to Indian homes and celebrates Indianness in design.